Would you mind introducing yourself and giving a little bit of background?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Angelica Ojinnaka. I currently reside in Western Sydney at the moment, and my background is in Nigerian. So a lot of my advocacy that I do at the moment as a youth advocate is in the space of young people, the way they're supported, and young people from different cultural backgrounds, including my own. So I did quite a bit of youth advocacy in the space of African youth,
Hmm.
whether it be African youth and how they are represented in different platforms. But one of the key areas that I'm quite passionate about and do a lot of my advocacy on is on mental health in the African community. So I center a lot of my work around this and a lot of my other professional work as well. Outside of being a youth advocate, I'm also a researcher. So I'm also researching all things young people
Hmm.
and the way that they're able to access services as well. So that's a little bit about me. I guess a little bit more is that I'm a older sister of
Hmm.
many siblings, which is such a joy. I really do describe that. I like to sometimes actually start off saying that because how I am as a sister and how I interact with my siblings impacts a lot of what I do and what I've chosen to do in life. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you do quite a lot, honestly.
Yeah, mixture, mixture of different things that
How did you first get started in youth advocacy?
So I would say that my desire and my passion for youth advocacy started from very young. I
Hmm.
was the kid in high school, even actually in primary school, who was Miss Do Everything, wanting to be part, wanting to
Yeah.
be part of not just out of like I thought I was the greatest kid, right?
Hmm.
But it was out of a desire of just trying to figure out where I fit, what I want to do, and then I stumbled across a lot of different gaps in life that I noticed in the supports that I needed as a person and as a young Black woman growing up and trying to figure out their life. And youth advocacy started to speak to me in high school when I would see that there's other young people like me
Hmm.
who don't have access to resources for their education, don't have supports and services, or don't even have examples that look like them out there. In different areas that they may be interested in. And so I started to get involved a bit more in school activities, whether it was advocacy through sport, because I was also the kid who loved doing any sport except golf, nothing against golf, but I was just that's the only sport I didn't double step into. Um, but I would go and do a lot of different things, whether it was also debating. And I started to really gather my interest in advocating for our voices in school, and then went on to do a bit of youth leadership there. So that's how I got started. But the core root of it is actually from my lived experience,
Hmm.
what I was seeing in my life and how I was seeing that I wasn't being supported in different areas. And I thought that that's where I wanted to contribute my voice and carry that on into post high school as well.
You said before that you really like to focus on mental health.
Yeah.
Why would you say you put that as your like main focus towards your advocacy?
Definitely. I would say I put that definitely to my main focus because mental health cuts through a lot of different other areas as well, which people tend to tend to not look at mental health beyond just the physical, like the biological, what's happening in your brain,
Hmm.
which very much is. But mental health is, at least from within my own community, encompasses everything else. It encompasses community, it encompasses people, environments, how our society is going economically as well. So that's definitely the core of where my advocacy does lie.
That's great. I recently spoke with a refugee rights advocate, Idrasa Doumbouya, who's also in the Community Voices project.
Yeah.
And he said that the government fails in communication with a lot of cultural groups because the communication channels just aren't there. And I've read a media release where you said something similar. How do you think the government could improve this kind of communication?
Yeah, so there's several different ways. Um, but the main thing that I say is that from the beginning, community groups that are diverse in experiences, whether it's culture, ethnicity, religion, need to be included from the beginning of any single planning into any single policy, that decision that we're making when it comes to Australia as a whole.
Yeah.
And that's because whatever we decide now will impact us later. And we shouldn't have to always be responding and playing catch up all the time to get, when something goes wrong, or when we see that, hang on, there's a community that's being left in the dark. So how the governments, I guess, could be more responsive is to go to the places in the heart of where community groups are already established and existing, and form a relationship that is built on trust, and built on not just trying to create a facade that you tick boxed, yes, consulted this community. It's not about that. It goes much more deeper. Do you care about the way that we contribute to the whole Australian society? How you show that is coming to our tables, coming to our environments, and actually giving us the opportunity to speak for ourselves as to what we are seeing on the ground in our communities. That tends to happen so far later into the discussions on different topics. And I see this in the mental health space too. The pandemic has shown the disproportionate impacts on mental well-being that lockdown has had in different communities, such as and locations such as in southwestern Sydney, here in New South Wales, and a lot of migrant communities are based there. And it wasn't until way after that the government responded to the needs that these communities wanted. Why is it reactive? It needs to start from the heart. When the pandemic really began, and when the response in terms of restrictions and how we get out of this in terms of recovery started as well, that's where our voices need to be included. So yeah, that's just one main way. Another way is also to be transparent in your communication, but also communicate in a way that is at a level and the respect is there amongst those communities too. Sometimes I've listened to the news and I've wondered, why are people speaking down about our communities? Why are they talking about my community in a way as if we don't understand what's going on, in a way that's demeaning or comes across as so not strength-based, but points out all these flaws. I use flaws in inverted commas because we don't, about our communities when they're not true. That's where communication is so key. Have people like us who look like us alongside you. Make it clear that you're actually listening and communicating in a way that is appropriate and makes sense to our communities as well. Those are the two key things that I really see should be ingrained in the decisions we make going forward now. Yeah.
There's been, once again, when I spoke with Andressa, he said that a big part of it would be having the people who they're trying to talk to as decision makers. And I feel like this is a great question for you, because I know that you're running for election in the local council.
Yeah.
What kind of goals do you have if you were to get elected in that position?
So when it comes to local council, I feel like local council is so powerful for this, because at a local level, that's where community voices are really actually quite engaged, and where we can actually feed into a lot of the bigger issues that are happening, because a lot of the decisions that are made at a higher level come at a local level is where they're directly implemented and where they're kind of modeled and changed to suit what different locations need. And so my big thing in my own community, and as an African woman, we don't do things in isolation. We don't do things as just by ourselves as individuals. It's all about the community. And how I was raised was always to be thinking about others as well as myself, and thinking about how our collective needs matter in the greater good, and for us to be able to then thrive as one, as individuals and together. And that's what I would hope to see and do in a local government position if I was to be elected. And if I wasn't, it's something that I'd still carry on doing, because that's what is at the heart of advocacy, right? We never advocate alone. It's not possible to. I don't think it's possible to in many regards, because when you do that, you lose you lose your own self-humility, but also the essence of what it means to be a collective Australian community. And that's what people are waiting for think the pandemic has kind of shown the cracks in selfish ambitions that exist at a local level, and people are waiting for just an opportunity to kind of come together with someone or people who will just listen, who will provide an avenue for them to actually contribute meaningfully in the way that they would like to. And whether or not you sit on different sides of policy ideas or different sides of politics, we should still be able to navigate genuine and meaningful conversation together.
Would that lack of communication between councillors be your greatest criticism of the current government?
I would say it's one of. It definitely is. I think the communication is a big challenge, because it seems to be that the things that are on the grounds that we're seeing in communities are not coming across into the bigger issues, are not being translated or expressed clearly in the way that the final decisions are being made. And so a lot of people are feeling left in the dark. I know sometimes I will open up something in regards to the current news, whether it's at a federal or state level, and I'm thinking, where did this come from? Where did this come from? What was the basis of this decision? Who was consulted? Why is that process not transparent? And maybe the keyword here is transparency. People are looking for, I guess, responses that are clear, where they can clearly see themselves and people actually openly being talked to. And when it seems to be hidden, that's where people go, hang on, what's really going on here? We can't afford to do that anymore, because people's lives are well and truly, we've seen in the pandemic, people's lives are at stake when it comes to us not being transparent with the decisions that we do make and why we do them. And as someone who advocates strongly for mental health, transparency in the decisions we make in any type of health policy or any policy that's going to directly impact the well-being of citizens is crucial. Otherwise, we are only exacerbating the problem that exists. And some people have referred to it as the shadow pandemic when it comes to the mental health effects of everything that's going to happen. We're only going to heighten that even more. Yeah.
We've spoken a lot about mental health already. Now, I know you work with various mental health organizations and advocacy groups. Have there been any key achievements for you that you've done yet within those groups?
Yeah, there's a really recent, two really recent examples that I'm really proud of, and not just proud of for myself, but mainly for my communities. So the first one is I'm part of I formed a group with a bunch of young people, as well as the Western Sydney local health district, called the African Australian Youth Suicide Prevention Committee. And we're really excited for this coming October to be holding a series of events where we just gather young people together to talk about mental health and how we tune into ourselves, our communities, stigma, and other areas related to mental health and what that means for us. And this is a really cool opportunity that we're doing online still, given the current circumstances that we're in, to talk about how we're all going. Because, my mum and I often talk about how, till this day, people in our community still call each other crazy when we talk about mental health, still don't like to use that term. And I remember that was experience I had growing up when I was going through my own challenges as well, that I felt like I didn't have a forum to open up about what I was experiencing in the way that I communicate it. And when I would communicate it to people, they took away the cultural side of things, right? And so this event is really focusing on the cultural nuance of our experiences, and bringing young people. It's just a fun place for us to just kind of chat with different figures who are known to the African community, but also those young people who have lived experiences of either losing someone to suicide or going through their own mental health challenges as well in different parts of their life. And we're going to get to express that all together, but also do it in a fun way. So that's something that's there's different things that get held like that about multicultural communities as a whole, but this is very specific to African youth. And another really exciting thing that I got to be a part of was creating a suite of resources for an organization called Origin, who leads in terms of the youth mental health space. And these resources were all about cultural diversity, youth mental health, and identity. And we got to create a podcast series because I was really pushing for a different format for how we talk about mental health, right? It always, I love the academic papers. Like I said, I'm in the research space, but sometimes reading can get tired and I just want to hear something. I just want to hear a good story. And stories are so relatable. It's like, I think storytelling is at the heart of what I love to do. And that's what we were able to create, a podcast series that's speaking to the mental health workforce about what you need to know about identity and its importance in youth mental health, or culture, families, community, all of intersectionality, all these different parts that are so key to how you interact with young people from different cultural backgrounds. So those are two things that were really exciting that I got to participate in for this year and really spearhead. But like I said, it's more exciting because I got to do them alongside other people like me. And that's really special.
Yeah, well, they both sound like really great programs, and I'd personally love to listen to a podcast like that. You know, there's too many kind of analytical types of media when it comes to mental health.
Yeah.
A good podcast where you can just listen, that genuinely does sound pretty interesting.
Yeah.
We've spoken a little bit about the pandemic so far in terms of mental health, but in a recent media release, you said that you had the unenviable job of trying to convince your sister and family to get the vaccine. I'm just curious, why would you describe it as an unenviable job? Like, are they hesitant?
Yeah, it's the hesitancy. I think I said unenviable because I know what it's like when you're getting a whole bunch of Africans to come and talk, African young people to come and talk about one thing. No, in my family, not everyone agrees on the same thing. I just foresaw, oh my goodness, this is going to be an exhausting kind of like conversation to have, and I don't want to have it, but I'm going to have to be the one who does. And I think the hesitancy came not from a place of not being educated on the current situation. There's a lot of things that are at play in my context, and I'm also a young carer as well. So one of my siblings has an intellectual disability, and so a lot of the things that we talk about and we discuss are around the safety within the home and how we can establish that. But the thing I noticed about the hesitancy that was happening in my family came from a lack of clear communication, again, from our leaders that talk to communities like myself. Instead, it was language that was quite demeaning, quite almost felt like we were being treated or talked to as second-class citizens in Australia. And that's where the hesitancy around trusting the decisions being made on the vaccine came from. And so when we were able to have more open dialogue about that, I managed to get my family to be convinced to get the vaccine. So that's really exciting, and everyone's going to have their first most of my family will have their first dose actually within the coming week, which is really, really amazing on my end to see. But also it just opened my eyes to the fact that we just have to really look at the fact that so many families are so different. Like I said, I'm a young carer. I'm thinking about the impact of the vaccine on people with disabilities, and also COVID on people with disabilities as well. There's a lot of things that people are trying to think of and trying to make decisions of, but when they see either fighting about the vaccine, or when they don't see people like themselves being discussed openly on forums about the vaccine, where are they meant to go with how they believe about it, except on online forums or places where there might be misinformation. So that's, it was unenviable because I just was like, I can't be bothered for the cause, but it was a worthy one. It was a worthy one because it opened my eyes to what is the reality that people like myself and other young people who have to be the communicators in the family have to go through.
Well, I mean, we blew through it pretty quick, but I think that's the bulk of my questions. Is there anything you'd like to make a statement about? Anything further you'd like to discuss?
I think all your questions are really, amazing just to kind of chat to you about. And I guess the thing I would really like to add in terms of this response is in terms of the pandemic and lockdowns and in even in the area of mental health, is that a lot of the things that I identified as strategies and challenges for us to move forward or do better on with different communities were things that these communities were crying out for before the pandemic began. Were things that people have been talking about for years. How we adequately translate materials for communities, how we actually communicate properly with key leaders in our communities or groups that are much more isolated in society on different areas, and where the resources are and how accessible the resources are for these communities as well. And even young people themselves who have been saying, hey, where is my voice in the larger picture of things? Left in the dark and kind of looked at as an afterthought as well, and having to just accept the responses that are happening within the community and society as a whole. This is not a surprising thing. I think a lot of people came into this year or have reached a point this year now where they're just exhausted of having to repeat themselves. And repeating yourself about the same thing in your life will have an impact on your mental health and how you feel like you can thrive in society. So I just wanted to make that point that these strategies have existed. Let's start listening to communities, but working with communities, not just for them, on the issues that matter to them.
So I guess on that, do you think that this kind of breakdown in communication and representation was inevitable, and that the pandemic has just really brought it to light in not the best way? That doesn't sound right, but it's really showcased where it's faltering.
I would say definitely, because I definitely think that it's just heightened what has already existed. I will honestly say that I've had conversations with my mom where I've just been like, I'm not surprised, and I've just looked at something on my phone and said, I'm not surprised this is happening right now, and I would wonder, why am I not surprised? I'm not surprised because it's something that I've felt from before. It's something that I've seen in the mental health space before, in other areas as well of society and the decisions we make, where a lot of people's experiences are not included, or the way that they understand things, whether it be their own understandings of mental health, their own understandings of how vaccines work, is not being clearly understood or incorporated or valued. And when you don't feel valued, when it comes to another situation, again, you're like, well, I've already been devalued once. Can I be surprised that it's happening again?
It degrades as time goes on. It gets worse and worse.
Exactly. But there's hope. There's hope because I think the shift in the voices of people in my community, I've seen it in myself with the organizations I'm a part of, us being more loud and more vocal and putting our foot down and being like, no, we can't go on further with feeling like we're ostracized in Australia. We are part of Australia. So listen to us. We're here, but listen to us in a way that's meaningful. And it's happening slowly. But I would love for it to be a whole lot faster on many different fronts. But I can't complain that it is getting there.
Well, that's fantastic. Angelica, I got to say, you seem like an incredibly bright, caring young woman, and I'm genuinely excited and hope you win the election. I'm excited to see where you go.
Thank you. And I really appreciate this conversation as well.
Of course.